It is now 6 o'clock, and I hereby call the June 13th, 2023 City Commission meeting to order. City staff, please call the roll.
Mayor Hattasol.
Here.
Commissioner Butler.
Here.
Commissioner Mata.
Here.
Commissioner Morse.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Our one item on the work session this evening is the 2023 year-to-date financial analysis and 2024 budget and capital improvement program overview. Jason, I guess you're starting.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, we have quite a few items in your packet this evening. A lot of those are for your education, and some of them are reminders, some of them are forecasts that you can absorb. We'll run through the calendar here in a few slides, but obviously we're leading up to a September consideration of the budget for 2024. Tonight we're going to talk about several of our major revenue sources that the city has. I don't think it's a mystery. We've talked for several years. Property taxes are just a very small percentage of what we operate on. Around 10% in the general fund comes from property taxes, but 90% come from other revenue streams. Our debt is very similar. We have an employee benefit fund and KP&F, which we also rely on property taxes to fund. But virtually all these other revenue streams, sales tax, franchise fees, compensating use, etc., come into the general fund and help us operate on an annual basis. These slides are really meant to give you trend lines and more of a reflection of where we are through the first quarter of this year. You can see our sales tax are starting to flatten out a little bit. Over the last 5 years, we've seen an increase. We had very plateaued years, 15 through 20, but we are starting to see more revenue come in from a sales tax perspective. Property taxes, we continue to, I have one, yeah, thanks. I'm still trying to digest my dinner I ate 5 minutes ago, so that's really the problem. Property taxes continue to maintain a steady revenue stream as well, and we'll get into our general fund dashboard, which will highlight these things a little bit more. But yeah, we're looking at around 6 mils in the general fund, which generates just a little less than 4 million. As I mentioned earlier, 10% roughly. Franchise fees continue to increase. Those are good numbers for us to see. That's a result of growth in our economy. When we see gas and electric and cable and the franchises that we have out there continuing to increase, our end users are probably seeing higher bills, more revenue being generated by the company, but obviously they're paying their 5% back to the city in most cases. Compensating use continues to rise, and that has really helped our sales tax numbers. We're very pleased and fortunate we got those changes at the state when we did. They've really kicked in here the last 5 years and helped generate additional revenue for sales tax revenue on goods and products that people are buying out of town on the computer and being delivered here in Manhattan. Do you have a question?
No, I'm glad you explained that, because
Yeah.
people see this compensating use tax and what is it? It's essentially the internet sales.
Exactly.
So we just got to highlight that, but you already
Yep,
did that.
absolutely. Special liquor tax, you can obviously see the dip there. We've got a few revenue streams that dipped in 2020, 2021 due to COVID, but we're starting to make our increases back and go exceed where we were prior to COVID. So I think for your discussion, later this month on where you want to budget for special alcohol. You've got some good revenue streams here to rely upon. Transient guest tax also increasing. A lot of the increase has to do with obviously coming out of COVID, but we do have an additional hotel in the marketplace, the Marriott down in Aggieville. Obviously the Hampton came off, so there's a net gain there of a few, but the Marriott down in Aggieville is doing very well, and most of our, as you've heard from the CVB, most of our hotels are recovering, and we're generating projected well over $2 million this year on our 7%. General fund overview, cash balance has been something we've been lecturing and debating and talking about for some time. Not a comfortable state there, 2016 through 2020. Even into 2021, started to see a little bit of a rebound. And obviously we are well over the beginning fund cash balance that we had targeted through the past several years. A lot of that has to do with federal money reimbursing the city for some of its losses and some of the other categories that we've received through the airport. We've also had operational savings. Obviously very difficult to hire in 2021, 22. We're just starting to come out of that. We're still not seeing our levels of employment in 22 through the end of the year where we'd like them. 23, hopefully we're already seeing a better trend there, better applications, better recruitments. So we're looking to get back to a normal state of operation. Being at 16+ million as a cash balance does give some flexibility to conversation in terms of excess revenues and how we'd like to proceed with our 2024 budget. You're going to hear us consistently say that $9.5 to $10 million range, given what we have from an overall budgeting standpoint and an overall risk that we share with many other agencies in the community that respond to emergencies. Like to have that $9.5 to $10 million balance there to give us that security.
Jason?
Yep.
So that $9.5 million target has not changed over 7 years here. Is it considered, is that number based on a percentage of our overall budget? Because obviously that's gone up 50% in the last 7 years, most likely. Or is it just based on our amount of debt we have to have X amount? Give me a what's,
yeah.
How come that hasn't expanded as our budget has expanded?
It's really about 3 months of operating. And in the general fund, we've hovered right around 30 million as far as an operating budget of money we've actually spent. It doesn't mean the general fund's budget isn't bigger than that, but when you look at our actual expenditures in the general fund, you'll see we're spending around 30, 31, 32 million. Now, we'll have a budget of 35, but we'll underspend. But that 3 months of operation is really where the target is. And this really comes from GFOA.
Right.
They have a recommended cash balance, and they look back to your operating budget, and they recommend at least 3 months.
So the reason our target hasn't gone up is because our spending has not really gone up over that 30 million.
Our budgets may be increasing, but our spending has been relatively flat. Okay. And it's allowed us, obviously, to capture some savings and take those ARPA funds and CARES monies and leave them in the general fund. You know, it's a theme that you're also going to hear throughout the next 3 or 4 months. This is one-time money. It's not money that's sustainable. It's not going to be there every year. We can't take, I wouldn't recommend we take $6 million and plug it somewhere and think that's the $6 million that'll be there for the years in the future. So, but there are things we do. There are a number of projects we entertain and go construct, and those are one-time deals where we're either looking to issue debt to do those things, or we got an ERP system on the horizon. We've got a lot of modernization we'd like to talk to you all about in our capital improvement program. So there's plenty of ways to spend the money, but the conservative nature of letting that be a slow burn is what we've talked about versus all at once, and then right back to an unpredictable revenue stream scenario.
How much of the 16 million in cash balances is due to the department savings?
So for this year, I think last year, I'll get to that because
Okay.
the dashboard that we'll touch on will highlight how much in the general fund we actually spent versus what we
Okay.
budgeted.
All right, thanks.
I think we saved roughly $1.5 million to $2 million, but we'll cover that here in a second. Just a highlight and a reminder of our general fund major revenue sources by percentage. Again, I feel like we're moving in the right direction on revenues, but it is a good reminder of just how much other revenue supports the general fund beyond property taxes. It's you know, we've given you, and in the packet tonight there's example residential and commercial properties, and it breaks down those taxes, and it highlights what comes to the city and what goes to everybody else. It's a very similar application to the general fund, where we're only supporting 10% of that through the 6 or so mills that we levy in the general fund. Clearly the general fund needs more than that. It's a $35 to $40 million fund, and 6 mills generates clearly not that much. It's 6 mills times $640,000, so about $4 million. So that again, it's just that 10% equation. General fund revenues, this is kind of looking at actuals, 02 to 03. You can see we are trending in the right direction again from a revenue standpoint. 2023 slightly higher than where we were in 2022. Just a reminder, we're 15% more in franchise fees, and our investment income is also up, comparatively speaking, from 02 or from 22. I credit that back to Rena and Rebecca, who do an excellent job. AGH gave us a lot of pointers a few years ago, and that consulting firm that came in and helped out in the finance department, and they both clearly have paid attention, and we're generating more income in that regard as well.
On that Discovery Center, big bump there, that has nothing to do with any of the money the foundation or foundation raises or anything like that. This would be just money that they've brought in, or admission fees or sponsorships or whatever they've done in-house.
Their last exhibit, the temporary exhibit, was very, very successful, and they had most of it is visitation increases, and that's one of the big components that has helped driving some of that increased attendance has been some of the temporary exhibits and the special events they've had.
Good to know.
And I know I highlighted Rena and Rebecca on the investment income, but we should really highlight them on all the information you're looking at tonight, all the attachments. They've done a great job in trying to gather this for you all this evening and really set the stage for the discussion for the next 3 or 4 months.
Okay, one last question. I should ask it earlier. Is year to date through the end of May or through the end of April? What time frame are we looking at?
April.
Through the end
Just April. So okay,
Yep.
I just didn't figure you could turn the Mayans around that quick yet.
Not that fast.
Expenditures are also up, and when you sit there and compare the prior year revenue to expenditure, you can see that they're up. A lot of that has to do with our pay study. A lot of that has to do with our commitment to vehicle replacement and our commitment to IT. These are 2 areas at which we vacillated, in some years just underfunded, trying to balance a budget, but our general fund expenditures are committed to those 2 things, and we're starting to see that transpire within the general fund itself. Revenue neutral rate, we're going to dive into this topic, and I really don't want to leave until you're all very well under the impression of what we need to talk about by July 11th. So if there are questions on revenue neutral rate, let's dive into them. This has been modified. This was modified today.
Yeah,
exactly.
like what I saw. Right?
Yep, we received updated information from the county today that validated where we were from a evaluation standpoint. So we had speculated 6% from Riley County. They came in at 9.9. We speculated 2% from Pottawatomie County. They came in at 5.8%. So the overall valuation grew by 9.5%. The original one we sent to you was a growth of about 5.8. So this is a solid 3.7, 3.8 above where we had forecasted previously.
And isn't this kind of down some from some of the horror numbers we were hearing earlier, which is 13, 17, all sorts of stuff?
The end of year, Riley County Appraiser's Office gave a range, anywhere from 8 to 14% that they had seen in the county. And it was in the county wide. And it never really specified what area or by a geographic location. It was county-wide, and that's why the percentages went from 8 to 14. Obviously, they've shared with us today at 9.9 for Riley County, overall valuation increase. So that takes the city valuation from $633 million, and that's an assessed value, so that percentages are applied to that. That's not an appraised value. It grew from 633 to 694. So you've got really just shy of a 10% overall increase. So what's that do? Well, it ripples down through this sheet, and it shows you what that growth will do to all the levies that are supported by the city's 52 current mill levy. And that's RCPD, that's the library, there's the general fund and the other funds that I referenced earlier that are supported by the mill levy. And it shows you a comparison from 23 to 24, and we basically held those mill levies constant and allowed each of those funds to realize that full 9.5% increase. So you can see it leverages 1.7 million more for RCPD. It leveraged 261,000 more for the library fund, and another 60,000 for the library employee benefit fund. And you can see it ripple down through then the mill levy supporting the city operations to a total of just over $1 million realized from that 9.5%.
And then your little off to the right arrows running around, you're saying 380,000 from community improvements, so a little over half a mil or whatever.
Yep.
Would be from new people paying taxes, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the split that the county typically provides us. There's existing growth on existing properties, and then there's new construction that's taken place. Yep, and those are separated out. So the same mill levy in 2023 generated $33 million. The same mill levy in 2024 projected would generate $36 million. So you have a $3.1 million overall property tax growth realization on the 52 mills that the city of Manhattan levies. So the revenue neutral rate is calculated by looking at the prior year ad valorem revenue, which is really that 33 million I referenced here previously, and then you divide that by that valuation. And Rebecca ran these calculations for us, and this is also different than what we sent out because we adjusted it. So the revenue neutral rate mill levy calculation is 47.6. That is at least 4.5 mils lower than where we are today. If you were just going to generate that 33 million in revenue. Obviously, anything above that, anything between 33 and the 36 that we show here at a flat mill levy, you exceed the revenue neutral rate. And the commission on July 11th will actually pass a resolution as to one way or the other. You'll have to indicate to the community as to whether or not you're going to exceed the revenue neutral rate or you're going to be at the revenue neutral rate or below. Any excess kicks us into a different timeline for a budget consideration. Meeting that is a different path. It's a much quicker path too. This is the path of exceeding and not exceeding. If you exceed, we'll basically replicate what we've done the last couple of years. where in June we have our typical outside agencies. We follow up in July. It's our third and fourth budget work sessions. That is when the revenue neutral rate is established. And in August, we hold our utilities. We also plan to bring back the August 22nd. We'll give you a more in-depth departmental overview of where we're at in the general fund. And then in September, we'd look to host the hearing. If you're not going to exceed the revenue neutral rate, this calendar moves up dramatically, and we would be cutting out or adding to meetings in June and July in order to publish and have that first hearing in August. The revenue neutral rate, I'll remind you, there's a notice that's put out. It gets confusing because the notice that we put out in August for the public hearing could be even different from the revenue neutral rate notice. Last 2 years, we've put out two different numbers. There's a revenue neutral rate that you say you're going to exceed. You still have to identify something. And then you come back and you publish a budget with a corresponding mill levy. So very easy for a taxpayer to get confused because we've noticed two different things. But I would encourage everyone to really pay attention to the public hearing notice and then ultimately first and second reading of the budget. That's really where the decision will be made. Those notices are statutory, they're required, we have to provide them. And if folks aren't paying attention, they could get easily confused as to what it is you're intending to do versus what you'll actually vote to do. So, any feedback or questions on the process? Just clear as mud.
Was there any pushback this past session on this at the state legislature? Because the state doesn't stay revenue neutral or anything like that. How can they expect anybody else to in the days of inflation and stuff like that? So was there any introduction of this as the stupidest thing ever?
I think they see it as a transparency issue. I think they see it as are the constituents really informed of what their local governments are doing? I think you have to look at what we do in Manhattan, being on TV, presentations, media in the room. That may not happen everywhere. Yeah. So I think it's a real attempt to get information out to constituents that otherwise may not get it.
They may not really be promoting the idea that they don't want anybody to exceed the number. They just want everybody to be aware of it.
Correct.
So that this whole being surprised thing stops happening.
Yeah. That's my impression. You two have, yeah.
I think the league did try to get some better wording, a little bit better processing, but I don't think there was ever a floor vote. Both the leadership just simply didn't want to do it. If anything, they wanted to make it worse and tougher. So I don't think there was any serious effort by either side to manipulate it this past session. But certainly it's one that, as Jason said, I think I'm sure they're hearing about it because it's confusion, because it basically says in July when you have to publish that you're going to exceed it, you have to give an estimate of how much you think you're going to exceed it. And then when you actually get to your official public hearing, you might recall we had two publics. We have a revenue neutral public hearing, and then we also have a regular public hearing. And so sometimes those don't wash, and so and that's where the confusion is, because they get the official notice letter from the county clerk that says this is what these units of government are anticipating.
Just to make sure I understand it correctly too, the revenue neutral rate, if you were to want to stick totally to it, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of what I pointed out before, which was the new construction or new taxes. In even that small amount of increased revenue, you wouldn't be able to take in. So I guess then by extension, because we've done some lately, we've done these tax abatements. When those tax abatements come off, that would be more money we would get, but that would go over the revenue neutral rate.
It would.
So just collecting the money we want to get by getting those abatements off would put us over the revenue neutral.
And again, we used to have caps put in place. Like you couldn't exceed a certain amount. I view this as, again, more of a transparency effort. It doesn't hold you, and it doesn't hold the city to a rate. It's just, if you're going to exceed it, you're going to tell your constituents we're going to exceed it. But the education you're pointing out is accurate. You put TIFs in place, you put abatements in place, you do something that holds off a valuation from occurring, and then it occurs that year, it would absolutely exceed. This number, this 33,057, that's it. I mean,
That's the same.
that is going to be the same next year. It'll be whatever the number is you pass. It's no going back. It's no looking at how that was figured or what was included or what wasn't. It's just a flat number. So in this calculation, this prior year ad valorem revenue is always going to be the top line. And then your new valuation that we obviously just got today that's due to us usually by the 15th of June is going to be that bottom line. And it's a simple math equation that every clerk and city in the state will run and share.
But I think from our perspective, the consequences can be significant because you have a situation where, in our case, we had more cash carryover because we had a lot more vacancies. As you fill up those vacancies, you don't have as much discretionary dollars, and so you're planning on funding all of your increases in payroll, increases in insurance, medical costs, all of that's going to have to be absorbed by that previous savings or cuts in the budget. So and that's the starting point for the next year. So if you keep doing it every year, it really is designed to put the crunch and brakes on spending, period.
It'll shrink government over time if you do it, if you adhere to it. It just shrinks it.
All right. Next.
Yep. Debt portfolio, wanted to make sure you're following us in terms of the debt and all the funding sources that go into that debt. Again, Rebecca and Rena do a great job of meeting with us and talking about our debt. We do a monthly report. We're looking at our debt constantly. We like to look year to year. The biggest piece of this is the temp notes, that 66 million to now 160. That's the $100 million increase that we've talked about absorbing here for the last 3 to 4 years. It's a big push as to why the 0.5 sales tax for the 2023 through 2033 was formulated, put on a ballot, and ultimately passed. Fortunately, that is a massive revenue stream to assist with a majority of those notes. A lot of them still outstanding, so you can expect more larger debt issues in the next 2 years as we roll that out of temp notes into permanent financing.
Okay, back up again.
Yep.
So refresh my memory as to what different, okay, so special obligation bonds are STARS, TIFs, TDDs. Special assessments would just be
Benefit district.
benefit districts.
Yep.
And so, all right, never mind. That's good.
Yep. Another way to look at our debt, this is by percentage, so you can kind of see where utilities, city at large, specials, special obligation. Again, just a different way to look at the same 345 million, just broken down categorically. This is the statement that Rena and Rebecca provide us on a monthly. We look at then just how...
Jason,
yep.
How much debt do you expect us to add during 2024? Because we're currently at 100 million, and there's a limit to how much more we can do. We saw that. But as you look ahead at the projects, how much more are you planning to go to the maximum? I mean, it wouldn't be hard.
I think we have 36 million. Yeah,
that's right.
So the next slide kind of highlights 36.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, it was a smaller number.
Yeah.
So we're retiring debt every year along the way, which helps give us that. And a couple of years ago, we sat down and really started to forecast out this massive amount of debt that we're issuing in a very short period of time. And Rena and her staff started looking at that debt coming off, debt coming on, and ran it out. We've looked at what we refer to internally, the big five, the big six. So when you look at Aggieville, you look at North Campus, you look at the airport, you look at the levee, joint maintenance facility, we look at all that debt and we project it out. As far as the immediate future, that capital improvement program is the best place to go to look at what you're going to be facing by way of debt. We'll have each department touch on 2024, and we can have them even forecast 2025 when they come back in August. We wanted to get you that CIP tonight, so it's a large document. There's a lot there. Yeah. 2024 can be a focus, obviously, because that's really what we're asking you all to consider. But that will give a better reflection of the type of debt we're looking at in the next 3 to 5 years.
And I just wanted to add, based on that new estimated assessed valuation, that number at the top, that 633 is going to eventually change and go as high as 695 million. And so then that's over 717 million. And then that calculation just flows down, and that's going to increase our debt authority remaining.
Commissioner, there were a couple of years we were concerned, and we really had to strategically look at what we were going to do and not going to do by way of projects. We're in a more comfortable position, but it's still a level of debt authority that Manhattans would consider odd. I mean, we usually have more authority than this, but obviously we've been aggressive in some areas and done some major projects. At the same time, I highlighted the revenue streams so that it makes us more comfortable with the debt load we're at right now. But we'll keep watching this authority. Well, sure. It's important.
But you know what projects are coming better than we do.
Yeah.
So
we do,
with only a play of 36 million. Anyway, so but the top number is going to go up, is what Rena just told us.
She did, which will increase our capacity.
Yeah. Okay.
College and Kimball,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Denison and Kimball is a major project being designed right now. I would estimate that between $13 and $15 million. So that project that'll be the final piece of North Campus Corridor. We have remaining streets in Aggieville, Morrow Street,
and
12th and Laramie.
$3 million each.
So those three projects, Aggieville Triangle, we'll start some design work on and get some options to you all to look at that. Midtown and Handy Corner redevelopment opportunities are on the horizon. It'll probably refocus us to 12th and Laramie from a design and construction standpoint if that moves forward. But yeah, those two are probably our primary areas that I would forecast multi-million-dollar projects coming forward soon.
The Anderson water line deal, that would fall under the water sewer fund payment, not general obligation stuff.
Correct.
So that wouldn't be part of this stuff.
It's part of this 345 because you can see the utilities have their own little $100 million line item. Yep. But yeah, it doesn't count against the debt. These are the categories that don't count. They're excluded. So water bonds, sewer bonds, stormwater bonds, all the things you just mentioned. We'll issue that debt. It just won't count against the authority.
Okay.
We've had this practice of using GO bonds instead of like revenue bonds or other types of debt because we get better rates on GO bonds, sometimes more significantly better rates. And so, well, even now, I mean, we would still recommend staying that course. There would be other options. I mean, if there were have-to types of debt instruments that we could look at that wouldn't necessarily fall under the debt limit ratio. We're not recommending that we do that by any means, but it's just the other thing is our typical practice is to issue 10-year bonds, which that retires that debt fairly rapidly, and that's why we have a good amount of debt rolling off on a regular basis. Yeah, you've seen our special assessment debt decline significantly over the years. Yeah.
And Rena's going to look this up, but we were pleased with our last debt issue. You know, there was speculation of it being 4.5 to 5. The temp notes actually ended up being more expensive, which is odd. Usually our temp notes are like half of what we would issue permanent debt for, but that short-term money cost more than a 10-year bond recently. Rena's looking it up, but just to remind you, we're not issuing general obligation debt over 4%. We're in the 3s, if not high 2s still.
It was 2.8.
Yeah. Thank you. So those are still really good rates. Obviously, even in the heyday, we were still in the 2s. We were issuing temp notes about 1% and permanent debt about 2%. So fortunately, we're still very competitive with our rates.
Jason, I just wanted to add back to this slide. I did do a quick calculation. Our debt authority would increase about 18 million, so about 54 million.
Okay.
But we won't actually finalize that number until we pass the budget, and we get that information from the county when we're ready to pass the budget.
Thank you.
And that's due to
The valuation growing. That top
Yes, ma'am.
that top number will go from 633 to a projected 694.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll also pay off debt by that time as well, so it can increase as well.
Yeah. And we knew the trend line was going to get more comfortable over time, but it's a very good point to make. A couple of years ago, it got tight, and we really knew we needed to watch it. And we did a whole bond and interest analysis, looked at revenue streams, and we're very fortunate to have the finance staff we have and the ability to really get a better view of this. I'm glad we're moving in this direction. We need to continue to move in this direction, but it's expensive to replace things, and that's the business we're in. As soon as we build it, we're already talking about when we're going to have to replace it.
But it's going to take you years to actually get it. So
yes. ARPA. We've looked at this $10 million the last couple of years, and we've highlighted some moves here in the general fund to help capital improvements and other governmental services. We made those moves in 22. This year we'll move another $3.35 million into the general fund, again helping with those cash balances, but also helping offset the expenses that we incurred to qualify that money. Technology, which is really that enterprise system, along with some other software that we're looking at to modernize and really bring operations into a day and age where I think the easiest recognition is our water billing system is based in a really old system, and it's hard to be accommodating to a customer. And we need to make those upgrades and really ripple through the organization. That's not getting any cheaper. I think originally we were showing you budgets of $2-3 million. We're up to $4 million. It's just very expensive to do. So that's really where we're targeting that $10 million at this point. We've got that $2.6 million available for the city to appropriate. We talked about the fire station out east in the event Scorpius comes along. That fire station will more than likely exceed $2.6 million. And I make that comment based on stations 3 and 5 were built for about $2.2 million several years ago. So I have no doubt we'll be above that amount as we go out there and put that fire station in place.
Plus the trucks.
And well, staffing's a real burden, but the management and the oversight of ARPA. Do you have flexibility to use that $2.6 million some other way? Yes, you do. But there are those categories in that small print under there. And the more we hit, the more documentation, the more process and work we have to do with the federal government. If we can hit one of those categories and do one big project and use that $2.6 million, it makes it a lot easier for us to report and work through our auditing process. So that's my plug for one big project. So we've talked about this a number of times. You know, without Scorpius, it's kind of difficult to run out there and build a fire station. We're still hearing positive things from them. They're trying to button up their financing in a very turbulent time, but they have full intentions of being here and opening their facility second half of 2025. They have, I think most of you are aware of the updates that have been provided recently, but they've shifted to a campus style and are still on track and ready to move forward once they get their capital partners in place.
You know, a question on that 2.6, how soon, what's the timeline? You have to appropriate it and then you have to spend it?
We do. I believe by the end of 24 we have to dedicate it, and by the end of 26 we have to spend it. Yep.
Okay, now I don't have a problem with, you know, just trying to slate that against that fire station, because I know that's a bite that's coming up, and it'd be nice to just be able to check the box, and of course that won't cover the truck or the fireman.
No.
and that's going to be on top of everything else. So I think that's, you know, good simplistic look at it. I mean, you know, this particular chart, if you count the fire station and the other expenditures, there's those 4 piles of money, and that takes care of it.
Yeah.
Pretty easy to explain.
Yeah, the thing is, Scorpius gets built to justify the fire station. Chicken and egg. When are we going to get that?
Well, you know, that fire station is going to be needed anyway. You know, as I think of possible annexation of the rest of the commercial corridor between where we are and where Scorpion is, that, you know, no matter what, we're going to end up having to build a fire station.
Yeah, I think we will, but if Scorpius doesn't happen, we're building a fire station probably. You can't justify when it first gets built because there's just nothing there.
That 50 acres is an opportunity, and talking with the chamber, in the event we have another scenario where Scorpius isn't coming, they feel pretty confident we're going to be able to market that and draw someone in. So it'll take more time, though. I mean, it's a matter of
the timing's all I'm arguing.
Exactly. Yep.
But yeah, one-time money for one-time projects, that seems to be a way to go.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Just a reminder on work sessions, you got outside agencies coming on the 27th, so this will not include special alcohol or special revenues for SSAB, social services, sorry. But it will include your ABA, your DMI, your ATA, Wolf House, MATC, Library, and the MAC Art Center, yes. July 11th, reminder on the revenue neutral rate. July 25th, CVB and Chamber will be here. Utilities on the 8th. I mentioned the 22nd. We more than likely be bringing back departments to talk to you about their ops. I would tee up the strategic plan where we are in year 2. During the budget process, we need to revisit that, and that's really the direction we're going to be providing our departments. Look back to that strategic plan, look at those 5 goals, talk with the commission and the community about meeting those 5 goals over the next 3 years, given we're in year 2. So you'll be hearing more about that. And then your hearings in September. There are a lot of attachments. If you have questions about these, I would be happy to run through them. We did provide the monthly general fund financial report. So this is month ending April, so 33% of the year. I believe we've got this out to you previously, but we put it in the packet so you can kind of look at year-to-dates in all the general fund revenues and expenditures. And again, we're seeing upward ticks in revenue. We highlighted the expenditures as well. Clearly in 2022, we were taking in a lot more revenue, comparatively speaking, to our expenditures. It covers debt a little bit again. At the end, towards the bottom here, is more of an end-of-year analysis in terms of where we've been. And when you look at the expenditures at the bottom, Mayor, this is kind of where I come back to. We've hovered right around, as far as actuals go, in that $30 million range. We really haven't exceeded it a whole lot. Our budgets have hung right around there too. So when you look at 3 months of operating, we've roughly ran around that 8.5 to 9.5 number. So Revenue, though, clearly we've seen an uptick, and it's been well received. We, as an organization, are still in a posture of recovery. I think most businesses and most of the community as well. We're obviously dealing with inflation running all the way through our budgets, and it's impacting our spending. But again, our revenues are staying steady right with that inflation so far. We're optimistic. We obviously have tried to build in some cushion with these revenues, and we've let them sit in that general fund as that cash balance. And again, I'll reiterate that slow burn over time, just trying to avoid getting back into this teeter-totter on our cash balance of needing additional revenues to offset that targeted balance. Anything with this report you'd like to ask or see differently? We've had it out there for about a year now. Try to get it to you all quarterly at least to see where we're at financially, especially in the general fund, which is where the majority of us operate.
I was just wondering, when it comes to our bond rating, I know we slipped a few years ago. With all this new cash and stuff, have we officially moved back up that half step to top shelf credit rating, or not quite yet? Or what has to happen? More time, or since we've kind of got the ship righted, what's going to be the key?
It still boils down to our revenue sources and how we budget for those. So again, Jason mentioned earlier that 10% of our revenue is in the general fund is property taxes, and then 90% is comprised of other non-sustainable consumer-driven type of revenue, and that's going to be something that they bring up every time. I think seeing the cash balances grow, the strategies that we do have for the bond and interest fund has been favorable for us. But again, the way we budget revenue, it's going to be that concern for them. And then also, we just have so much debt outstanding right now, and within probably 5 to 10 years, it'll go down based on just the issuance of the debt for those big 5. We're only doing 10 years. We do have that revenue source for the sales tax, but essentially it's the increased debt, but then also the way we budget our revenue.
It's the structure of our, only a small percentage of property taxes go to the general fund constantly makes them nervous.
It does. Comparatively speaking to other cities, we're a bit of an anomaly, but you do have to take advantage of the sales tax you get. We've been at this for a number of years, and I always feel like that next year's sales tax conversation is always a bit of a lottery. There's always this perspective of, well, it's going on the horizon is a lot better than it is today. And it's powerful. The sales tax we generate in this town it's very powerful, and watching inflation just occur has been 7, 8, 9% annual increases over the last 2-3 years. That's substantial, and that's why you're seeing the balances we're seeing. I think we're shoring up our balance, but those other 2 things that Rena mentioned, it was the years where we were also having the debt, we were also heavily dependent on other revenue streams, and our cash balances were not high. No. That's when they were like, hey, whoa, we got to reevaluate you. I don't think we'll get back there until, as she mentioned, those other 2 things are addressed. I don't know if we'll ever truly be that dependent on property taxes as an entity. Clearly, I know to many taxpayers out there, they're like, what, are you crazy? We pay tons of property taxes. I know you do, but 90% of it goes somewhere else. 10 or 11% comes to the city, and that's what we get to play with. And that's what makes them nervous. But there are cities across the country that clearly rely on sales tax. And they're, in multiple cities, they are looked at favorably. The size of our community, the amount of money we rely on from a sales tax perspective, comparatively speaking, it's always going to surface itself.
They also, excuse me, go ahead.
Well, and we always give the stat about, was it 45% isn't property tax? We can't get the money on it. Yeah. I think hopefully down the road, like the Edge District, when that abatement comes off, they build the rest of it. If Scorpius, when that abatement comes off, when our districts come off, that's where you could see the revenue come in. Of course, by about that time, you'll probably annex out Potawatomi and the residential will kill you. But
we did do that analysis recently, Commissioner. $8.5 billion is the total value of property in Manhattan. $8.5 billion. $3.5 billion is eligible. There's 4.5 to 5 billion that is off. So we contacted the appraiser's office. We were just doing a little bit of analysis on some of our relationships and just trying to understand what are we talking about from a residential perspective, what are we talking about from a commercial perspective in the city of Manhattan, and I'm happy to provide that. But you're not far off at all.
that's probably one of the reasons why our sales tax is so high, because we're generating people coming in and out constantly because of all those institutions and everything. But unfortunately, our bond people don't look at it that way.
Exactly.
Well, and they do, though. They look at how are those institutions doing. So K-State has been declining, so that doesn't help. But Fort Riley had some moments where they actually downsized during some of that when we got downrated. So those are specific components. The other factor is just they want to see audited financials. So we really haven't had a bond rating where we've gotten credited for our big cash balance we have right now, because they want to see those 22 audited financials, and we had the temp notes rated that we didn't have all that. So having that sustained and secure and keeping that cash balance when you do the bond issue is important as well. And they reiterate they want to see not just 1 year, they want to see consistent years of having that high value of cash balances.
So while we're talking about sales tax, what's the latest, since the state gets their numbers a while before we get ours, or is the state's sales tax number still holding up well?
They were down a little bit, and I would say Rebecca helped me, we were fairly flat compared to a month ago.
Okay.
But still good. I mean, we were ahead of budget, so that was the positive aspect of it. I think overall the state sales tax was either flat to down a little bit. Their income taxes were up substantially, so their overall revenue was still continuing to climb. Right. They get a lot more revenue sources than we do. Big ones.
All right, go ahead.
Jason, I would be interested in you sharing that report you mentioned about the overall value.
I'll send you that email.
Yeah, good.
You bet.
I did want to ask, at the end of the year 2022, it shows that expenditures were 39 million, and no, the revenue was 39 million, and expenditures were 31.5 million. So that is what's bolstering our general fund now.
Cash balances, yes.
Cash balances.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because that's a combination.
In the general fund. Okay.
Correct. It's a combination of our savings from the expenditure side, and a combination. You can see that transfer line item of 12 million is a substantial amount, and that's bringing that off budget, offline revenue from the ARPA into the general fund.
Have we covered that last year's savings that you said you'd cover later? Where was that?
Yeah, so that's part of that question right there.
Yeah.
Yep. It's us realizing our expenditures were, I guess, we're close to $2.8 million less than we budgeted by way of expenditures. So we had those savings in combination then with the additional revenues, leaves us with that $16 million cash balance. These are in your packet. I'll start with the property tax dollar. We've done this for years. I think it's a really good reflection of just the full mill levy that people pay and where the city of Manhattan sits in there. And then we break down the RCPD library share, which is that 22 cents, and then our 11 cents is broken down between all these different pieces and parts. And again, we're talking about that $4 million in the general fund, $3 million bond and interest, employee benefit fund, fire, KP&F. Those are pretty much another 3 to 4 million there. So it's just a good reflection. It kind of gives you an idea of what's being paid for from your property tax dollar. We jump into the sales tax, and most of you are very well aware, we're in 2 counties. We have a sales tax rate in Pot County that's different than Riley County. Pot County here at 945 is where if you go to Dillon's on the east side, this is the rate you'll pay. If you go to the Dillon's on the west side, here's the rate you pay. It's a difference of 0.3%. Same store, same products, probably same prices, but you do have a different sales tax rate. We have a number of TDDs and CIDs that impact that rate. So when you go to the mall, you'll see that 0.75 on top of that 915. So they're right up to the 99 figure. The TDDs that are in the north end, south end, McDonald's, even out at Scenic Crossing, are all a half cent. So they'll be on top of the 915 as well and get you to 965. But again, just kind of those are educational pieces. The sales tax rates have changed a lot over the years. Obviously, with the state of Kansas pulling off that 6.5 for food, now Hy-Vee's and grocery stores and Dillon's are going to be a lot different in the upcoming years. You'll see things really vary in terms of what a sales tax. Our local sales tax are still there, so that 6.5 comes off, but you could have that same 2.65 on your food that'll stay local in those grocery stores for certain items. So that's going to be an education for all of us, and it'll generate a lot of confusion, I have no doubt, and we'll be up here trying to explain for folks. Those are in your packet. Additional item in the packet is just kind of a breakdown of an example for a residential and a commercial. I like, we hand these out to a lot of groups, 25 people at a time in the Leadership Manhattan class. They all get one. We do research on their addresses. We plug it in. Some of them appreciate it. Some of them really don't. But we try to break down, where their money's going. A property in Manhattan at $250,000, and I say Riley County, so really there is no, I don't believe there's any residential in Pottawatomie County in the city limits of Manhattan currently. So really when we're talking residential, it's in Riley County in the city limits. And this is how your taxes will break down. $250,000 home. If your house is $125,000, it's half of this. If it's $500,000, it's twice this. Those numbers work out just like you would think they would. But yeah, $250,000 homes spending $44.98 annually on their property taxes. $495 of that's coming to the city. That's 11%. That's roughly $1.36 a day for that individual taxpayer. For years, a 1 mil increase has on a $200,000 home has been about $23 increase, and that's still very applicable today, even though the valuation's grown so much. When you look at 1 mil increase for that average homeowner, and I can run that math for you real quick, but last time I did it was $23, $24 a year. We're not talking about a mill levy increase, but I always like to boil it down to that, to a taxpayer too, just what's the value of a mill, what's it cost an individual for that mill. Obviously 52 mills is on a $250,000 house is costing you $495 a year. That's just the 17. The 52 would be our combo with RCPD. You add those two together, and it's costing you about $1,500 for those 52 mills. We did a commercial example as well. It's just really a different tax rate. Instead of 11.5%, you run those properties at 25% valuation, get you to your taxable value. I ran a $750,000 business example, paying almost $30,000 in property taxes. $3,233 of that would come to the city.
So Riley County collects $1,213 a year on a $250,000 house, and the city collects $495.
Correct.
So Riley County doesn't spend any of that really in the city.
You'll have
so
to
they're
ask
spent. They say
sure
that they're only covering the people in the county. So they have a really big amount of money. I mean, I got a lot of roads out there
sure.
too, but
A little of it goes to the lawnmower.
There,
I'm just thinking about this, so I'm just talking out loud, thinking out loud.
They'll bring up, like, the jail expansion they'll have to pay for.
Yeah,
Shooting range.
yes.
that's true.
Any other questions on those? We like to provide those annually to you all.
The
just
physical
to
plan.
frame a reference and a point
Can you
of,
go back to that one that was the Riley County breakdown of the property, little dollar thing?
Yep.
Yeah, because on the top line there, it says 52 mills, but shouldn't that be the total mills for the county and the school board?
Yes, you're right. So that
Because that's going to confuse people, because you got USD there. I mean, and it looks like 52 mills the city, and we're giving some to the USD, and we're not.
gotcha. We can clarify that.
Okay,
We
that's
will.
the only thing.
We will win. Yep. And that's really, we try to provide multiple examples so people can track it. Yeah, that 52 is always going to be City of Manhattan inside and outside, and then everything else obviously brings that total to 156. But we can clarify on that one. Yep.
Because that's the number I figured would need to go up there, because they need to see that.
Exactly. Any other questions on the attachments? Yeah, that's included. There's a lot here. And like I said, I really want the department heads to run through some of their 2024 stuff with you in August. This one may take a while and could crash the system. So it's massive. And credit really back to our finance staff. We lost vision here and lost focus through our lean years. There wasn't a whole lot in the CIP to talk about other than our utilities. So we're glad to get back into this mode of getting this 5-year plan done and really highlighting where we plan to go. Obviously, you all get very involved in the general fund side of the capital improvement, but they've done some great things here in terms of just sourcing out all the different projects that are a part of the CIP. A lot of different revenue streams, a lot of different initiatives and projects forecasted, and we try to really give the community and anybody interested in the CIP a glance at just where is that money going. A lot in utilities, a lot in our city facilities and grounds and transportation network. We get into park and rec and some studies and heavy equipment as well, but a lot into our utilities and, water, sewer, those treatment plants, and all the infrastructure in the community requires consistent and continuous investment, as well as our stormwater. But we have put a lot of effort and energy into our facilities lately. Our sales tax for Park and Rec has done well. We're looking at a total investment near $30 million in the last 7-8 years. We're about ready to start SECO, which will round that out. That is part of that $30 million. It just highlights the process. We have an internal committee that really vets these things, looks at them, ranks them, and then we bring them forward to you all for consideration as part of the budget process. It is a very extensive document. I'll scroll down here. This kind of walks through a timeline and our prioritization, our criteria, the weight we give it, and then we work through each departmental lists, and there are a lot of them. Some of these are things we would love to do and want to plan for the community, but there are things we absolutely are poised to do, and a lot of those, as I mentioned, are utility based, but we do get into the SECO improvements, of which we have revenue for. New firehouse, that $2.6 million, we're anticipating going there in ARPA. Randy's got a lot of utility projects, so that really rounds out 2024. Then we get into 2025, and again, this thing just keeps going out and highlighting multiple projects, some of which are really large and utility based, and some are more amenities and in our parks. So I'd encourage you to look through that, take some time to come with questions as the departments approach you all, in August, and we can dive into that deeper.
I appreciate the effort that the finance staff and the departments have done. You'll notice in the detailed pages that we've got some really nice descriptions, pictures of different projects, taking advantage of some of our GIS capability, and so I think there's a lot more detail there than there has been in the past. So I appreciate the work that folks have done to generate this extensive document.
I reviewed it, I won't say thoroughly, but I did. And I do look forward to the opportunity for the commission to talk about some of these priorities. In the past, there's been public input on CIP. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen that opportunity. Maybe you put something out there, but I would be interested in seeing what the public has proposed for the CIP. Just so that we know what
Sure.
they're interested in. And then some of them, I don't know. I just think the commission ought to discuss some of them.
It's something that I know that you used to hear quite a bit about, well, several years ago, about the city, community members being able to propose some kind of a improvement thing, and we'd set aside $20,000, $40,000, $50,000 for that kind of stuff. Is that still, people still doing that, or does everybody forget that they could do that?
It's still up on our city website that it's open through this time frame, and you can submit any sort of capital improvement project if they want to. They fill out forms very similar to what our departments fill out in regards to project description and things like that nature. So that's still available out there in terms of them being able to have that input for those projects.
The process has been soured a little bit in the last few years.
Because there's been no money.
Correct. So I think our community, this type of program, this comprehensive nature, if we're ready to go out and do that again and are ready to fund those things, then I think that's a very much a process we can engage in. I do think that that discussion amongst you all should be consistent in terms of what you want to do with those, because you'll get a lot of neighborhood projects. You get a lot of little pet projects that people want to see in public property next to them. The stuff you're going to see in this plan is very comprehensive. It's part of studies. It's part of identifying where infrastructure is going to be weak and we need to invest, and parks that haven't been invested in for 20, 30 years. That's what you're going to get from us.
Before I was elected, I submitted CIP every year for 10 years to get a sidewalk along Knox Lane out to the Northeast Park.
On the south side there?
Yep.
Well, you eventually got one, didn't you?
Because the city wrote a grant, I think it was KDOT, and but Commerce?
Combination grant.
Okay. And so anyway, it's just diligence. That's all I can say. I don't even know that it worked. I think we were just ready for that piece of the trail to fit in place.
All right, what else you got?
That's it from staff tonight.
I want to get back to the revenue neutral rate because, I think Kevin really made a decision on that. A lot of people are pushing for the revenue neutral rate. My thought on that is it has too many drawbacks, as Ron pointed out. I mean, if you do that, you really shoot yourself in the foot because you can't capture the growth. But I would like to see, us do something less than a flat mill levy. Because the assessments, people were screaming 15%. It looks like about 9%. I think we have to capture inflation, on the city costs. So in my mind, the mill levy's got to be somewhere, above the revenue neutral rate, but lower than the 52.154. And I'm just wondering what the options are. Like just for instance, say you said, okay, we're going to go with 50 mills. That's over the revenue neutral rate. What does that do?
It's about a 5.5% increase.
Which I think fits with inflation.
Yeah.
Is why I settled on about 50.
Yep.
And that would lower it 2 mills. I mean, I think that's going to make businesses happy and property owners happy. But what I need to know is how does that damage the city budget from where we're going? Because I don't want to lower. I'm with you on that. We have to keep that $9.5 million in there. That's got to be there. And I don't want to destroy any infrastructure or anything like that, but is that doable, 50 mils? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, it'll cut about 1.2 million out, so it takes that 36.2 million down to roughly 35. But it grows, 33 million is where we were last year. It'll go to 35. A lot of that is going to RCPD in the current structure of mills. They have 1.7 million here. You go down to IRAN 6%, and it'll take it to 50.4 mils, but it takes that 1.7 down to 1.1. So it's a $600,000 impact if you apply it to all mills equally. You can always move that around too.
Yeah, that's where my head's at with this too, and I think got a law board meeting next week. We want to make sure they're lined up.
We're going to work on that, see what we can do.
Yep. Okay. Well, we're happy to run analysis, and we can give you feedback on how that impacts the budget. I figured we were in that ballpark, so I asked Rebecca to run it at 6%, and it's 50.4 mils, and it's right in line with where you were at. But yeah, it's a $1.2 million decrease, but it ripples through all those entities. And again, we've wrestled with that after PD has their budget. We know that's set. That mill levy basically gets filled in, and then it's the rest of the mill levies that we end up talking about.
And then, of course, I don't know, what the library board is doing. Do they just assume that, since they get 6 mills, they're going to continue, or they're going to try to, reduce some of their costs?
Yeah, and we'll find that obviously here at the end of the month. They'll come forward. We'll get you that information. We've shared with them kind of a 5 to 6% inflationary number as well. I think they're around that. So,
because they need to help out also. It shouldn't just be, we get 6 mills, thank you, and it just keeps going up. Mm-hmm. Though the library does great work. I like the library, but they need to also see where they can help on this.
Yep.
It was it the county's original number they threw out there was going up 2 and change mills wise? Did you see that? I
hadn't seen what the county is forecasted.
Yeah,
not sure either.
Because they got to build something that they got to pay for, and the 9.9% increase wasn't enough.
Wow.
For them.
Well, before you start cutting RCPD and the library, I think it's important that we talk about our CIP and what we can whittle also as not necessarily being essential. It's not just one piece or one category, it would seem to me.
Linda, we're not talking about cutting RCPD or the library. We're saying restrain their growth.
Yes. There's
a difference. But we're not cutting anything out of RCPD or the library. I think the library is fine. But my point is, does the library need a 9% increase, which is what this mill levy does? Does RCPD need a 9% increase? I think not. Around 4% is fine.
I do appreciate the discussion, because I think short of not going with the revenue neutral rate, it gives us more time to have these discussions, hear from your departments and their recommendations and their priorities, as well as the community. Obviously, the PD budget will be what it is, and that kind of sets the framework for that everybody, or at least we have to work with. But if we're going to go with a revenue neutral rate, and I'm hearing we don't, and I think I agree with you, the biggest disadvantage is you don't even capture new growth. So that's the key, because if you do, then that really compresses our time frame from what we have to do to finalize our budget for public hearing. And not having that as part of that, everybody said, well, the revenue neutral rate, we gave you another month. Well, no, they actually made us less. Kind of put us back on the old schedule, because you have to make that decision in July as opposed to August. So it's from that notification standpoint. So we do appreciate that input and that feedback, because that'll be very helpful, and I think will give us more time to really work through a lot of those issues and determine some of those priorities for where you want those spending to go. The budget's your biggest goal project, your biggest policy document that you have control over. So it's important to
I don't
take that
want
time.
to keep, I haven't said anything, I guess, but I assumed, but I'm not interested in keeping with the revenue neutral rate, just to state that.
Yep. No bueno.
Appreciate it.
All right, is that it from you? Since nobody's here that isn't paid to be here, I think we'll not have any public comment here. So we will stop with this, move on to the city manager briefing. And Ron.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Just a few things to cover. Just kind of a reminder, Commissioner Mata has agreed to continue doing June, has June for the radio station, and then Mayor, you're up for July. Yep. Kind of back into the rotation again from that matter. In your mail folders, last night was a copy of a letter to the Corps of Engineers on the levy. I wanted to just talk about what that represented just a little bit. So basically, you might recall you had information in December relative to kind of an update. Recall that the levy project, the bulk of the project was bid and awarded, but we had the gap in the railroad. So that's a piece that's not been designed or bid. So it was always envisioned that that would get added at some point. There was also an expectation that it would take additional federal appropriations to make that happen, and that's really what this letter was starting. So the Corps asked us if we could write a letter of support. So it's really just like when we send an email to the legislature saying, you know, we support bill such and such.
Yeah.
We'd like to see Congress appropriate funds that the Corps is requesting to have to finish our project for the railroad. So that's what that letter represents. The next step and I don't really think that request is coming until later this year as they get into their appropriations process, but ultimately we hope that they will appropriate more funds, and if they do, they'll come back then to us to either amend our current agreement we have with them to add to that, or it'll be a new agreement relative to that. But we also know that in the original estimates, there was a range depending on kind of a low, moderate, high estimate. So this letter kind of reflected the high estimate from things. Obviously, we ended up getting very good bids on that particular project. So more to come on that. Again, I would just kind of categorize that as a support letter for a federal appropriation. But if you have questions about it, I'm happy to visit with you about it more. In your mail folder tonight is a letter from Evergy, which gives you a little background on what's going on at the City-County meeting Thursday. So in their transmission line planning, master planning that they're doing.
Is it coming through the city? Is that what we're talking about? Is that why?
I think there's a portion of it that's going to hit the city. It's basically, my understanding, they're planning to put a new transmission line, or they're studying putting a new transmission line from the one they built north of town to St. George, and what's the route they're going to take to get there. Okay. So it's originally, I think they've already visited with Pot County, but they wanted you to be aware of it, because I think it does hit a little bit on the city.
Northview again?
In the northeast area of the city.
Of course, okay.
And then also part of the county, so. Yeah. And again, it's my understanding it's in a planning phase, and that's what I think they're also have some landowner meetings that they're coming up where they want to visit with them about it as well. So that's the only item that's on the joint city-county meeting, and that's at this Thursday at 4 at Riley County. Might be some other stuff that comes up. There's a Victory Week combined breakfast on tomorrow.
Well, they moved it to this morning, didn't they?
They did? I missed it if they did.
No one's going anyway, are they?
I was going to go.
Well, I got an email that they moved it to today, so check your invitation list.
All right, thanks. Good Morning Manhattan is Thursday at 7:30, and looks like so far me and Linda have done that for Director Pete's given his talk intergovernmental. Got Mark and John so far. That deadline would be this Friday. That's
26th, right?
26, correct. So if you want to participate, I do know
26th.
The 26th, yes.
I'm going to go. I haven't. I just got the notice, I think.
Okay, and then the county appraiser is giving a presentation at that particular meeting. And then there's established business leaders after hours on the 21st of next week. Flag Day is tomorrow. There's some ceremonies out front starting at 9, and at least 3 of you are involved in that. So we will be noticing that as well. If you want to look at your planning charts, kind of preview some of the things that are coming forward on the 20th. Next week, we have a public hearing. This is the first applicant for our speculative building program. Flint Hills Ventures LLC is proposing about 112,000 square foot warehouse. And this would be out behind McCall Pattern.
Between McCall's and the Krusty's folks. Yep.
And so there will be an IRB tax abatement application as far as that. We did preview that yesterday to the Pottawatomie County Commission because they were supposed to get their notice yesterday, and they were not as do we have a say in this? Is kind of were their remarks to me. Stephanie and I went over there, and because they had some questions about our request for proposals we have out on the Gateway Plan, and we certainly wanted representation from both the commission and the staff on that process, and do have a recommendation for Greg Webster to sit on the selection committee. We don't have the recommendations for the representation. That'll come in good time, but overall we updated them on several projects that are impacting Pottawatomie County residents, namely Levy Drive and US 24 is the biggie. Work is proceeding well there.
Can we speed it up at all?
Well, Schilling's doing work out there as well, so
they're doing.
And Ebert's moving right along. We have, as far as I know, we have all of the materials and stuff that we're hoping to finish that project with. Our goal is to get it done by the end of the summer before things really pick back up. So
just tell me we didn't agree to be for him to go do something else first and fill in on our. No, we need priority. It's crazy out there.
General agenda items. We've got first reading on the rezoning of 407 Pottawatomie. So remember, that was just in front of you at your last meeting, and you sent it back to the planning board. That was actually placed on there. They had a meeting the Thursday afterwards, so it was put on. That was the next meeting. That's kind of what the statute envisions, and they declined to take it up, so they had no action on it. So it basically doesn't change what they had previously done. So that was an interesting aspect. Not sure we've ever had that happen necessarily.
We don't want to debate what we said.
Yeah. They didn't even debate that.
So this time around, it only requires 3 votes?
It does. So that's planning to be on the 20th. We do have a RFQ for Lee Mill Village. This is our intent to have an application put together for MIH application, so moderate income household application, and wanting to see if there are some developers that want to team with us on submitting the remaining properties that exist there. We also currently have the developers for the request to rezone the Browning townhomes to RL to RLA. That was at the May 25th planning board meeting, where it went down 5-1.
So that doesn't stop it? They can still bring it to us?
They can, and they desire to. So
Just like the last one we had.
only worse. Well, it's the effect's the same, yes.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. So as far as I know, they still plan, they want you to hear why they think this is important, so.
Would you ask the planning board representative of some kind to come and also address why it was such a significant vote against it?
We've never done that before.
Well,
I mean, they can.
They have come
Well,
before.
Stephanie can tell us what their thinking was.
Staff
Well, I want to be sure we know. I don't want to have to go get a planning board member to tell me.
It should be,
It's
should be
it's in
part
their
of-
minutes.
should be
Certainly,
part
you
of-
can watch the meeting, but we've never asked a
Planning-
body that has a process in the law to come and testify.
I'm not asking them to testify. So tell me why.
And you have an opinion of someone. I mean, it was obviously, I would just encourage you to review the tape. That would be the best.
I suppose, yeah, have to.
So the other items there, we've got several second readings. We've got a recommended bid award on the Douglas Center parking lot, the rec center parking lot. So you recall we had a parking lot that goes in basically between the annex and the breadbasket, and that area gets expanded. We're also relocating the breadbasket's freezer and giving them, through CDBG funds, they're getting a new freezer. So those bids came in high, and they're supplementing that with a community foundation grant to help with that. So we will have a recommendation for that. We've got an amendment on the 620 Juliet property. Recall that we had some, where the gas tanks were, there were some substances, and we needed to extend that contract to further recommend, and we're still exploring what remediation efforts, if any, are needed, and with KDHE. So it's just an extension of our sale contract to close from that standpoint. We have a legal services agreement. This is for Bill Frost. It will be a new contract. We've historically had a contract with his firm. The Morrison, Frost and Olson firm is dissolving, and so this would be a separate contract. Bill's formed his own LLC, and so it'll be a contract for legal services with Bill. We have a request from the Stag Hill Golf Club for an outside the city water service agreement, and then we also have a supplement agreement with with KDOT for the levee and US 24 Levee Drive intersection. The amendment is they'd like to give us another $100,000 more, which is usually a nice adjustment. So that is a positive aspect. We also have a request for qualifications for the Seco Park improvements as part of the the rec centers and the Seco Park improvements. So ultimately we would typically have a commissioner that serves on that, so we don't need to know tonight, but well, I think you had already pegged that, hadn't you, Mark?
Yeah.
So that was that aspect of things, and then Aaron wants to proceed with the comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and the board concurred with that, so he's launching an RFQ for that as well. We do have a recommendation for starting the eminent domain process for some easements on a public works project relative to a water and street project, and so we'll want you to have resolution consideration for that. Then jumping to July 11th, obviously the July 4th is on a Tuesday. We're not meeting that week, and so we've got several general agenda items. A lot of there's several items. One would be the revenue neutral rate. So we'll have a resolution there for you to consider to exceed the revenue neutral rate. We'll talk about that more at your next work session a little bit. And also there's several there. You see 2A through D. There's some businesses that are out by the golf course and other areas that want to do a benefit district and then hire their own contractor. So there's some extension agreements. Some of them already have one service. So one of the discussion points we need to have is traditionally, if you've got one of our services, you've already signed a consent to annexation. If you get two, we've typically required annexation. So that'll be a discussion. I don't think any of these are wanting annexation, but they're wanting both services. So that'll need to be thinking about that. I know recently we had another one out by the airport that had wanted the second service, and we told them we were going to recommend annexation, and they said, never mind. So anyway, that's something for you all to potentially consider. We also will have a policy resolution for you to consider about our trademarks and copyrights of our city logos, and an update on the Johnny Call, and a policy that would, within that policy, will be terms relative to Johnny Call, and it's our position on that from a copyright standpoint. And then we also have outside the sewer service agreement, sewer only, to 1712 Murray Circle. That's just off Murray Road, which connects to Skyway Drive and Airport Drive in a different area. So that's upon consent. We've got first reading of an ordinance to amend the Stadium Place Greenbrier PUD. It's scheduled to I don't know that happened. Did that happen? I don't know. It says it's supposed to be on June 8th. For some reason, I think that got delayed. But this is a situation where the apartment place that's on the northwest corner of College and Kimball. The apartments there they're at a PUD. The PUD specifically didn't allow for short-term rentals, and they want to be able to have short-term rentals there. So that's the change in the PUD. Again, second reading or first reading, if you decide to pass the resolution on the eminent domain item, and then several second readings if the first readings pass. We'd have bid awards for the wastewater treatment plant for work on one of the clarifiers there. We've got some bank stabilization on Windsong. It's one of those situations where I know a couple of you live in that area, but if you don't participate, we won't have a quorum for that to even be considered.
You're not affected.
Yeah,
So
but that's across the street from me. I mean,
I know.
There isn't
I just,
any,
you know.
I mean, I should probably mention that. I mean,
Yeah.
I live on Windsong, but there's no financial advantage to.
Right.
I mean, the advantage is the street's not going to collapse, and I can still get to my house.
Exactly.
So you know, that's
Exactly.
what I want to make clear. So
Is that really necessary?
Yeah, I think it's necessary.
All right.
Let's see. We've got a street sweeper on for award, new replacement street sweeper, and then a final plat on the North Wing addition Unit 4. Well, I haven't heard that line. I don't know if it's readily available or we haven't bought one for a while, so I'm sure they cost more. Hopefully they're available, but it was in our CIP, and hopefully it's not too long of a lead time, but I haven't heard that specific situation. And let's see. We've got, should have a recommendation for the gateway plan for professional services by that time, possibly.
That's
For Highway 24?
Highway 24 Gateway.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
And
Have a
then,
nice welcome to sign.
and then
Gateway, welcome to.
there we go. Then also a selection committee on Sunset recommendation. So, on the back side, Jason kind of covered a lot of the work sessions are going to feature our budget discussions continuing. We also hope at your next one to have an update on the cemetery master plan. So that was one that was originally targeted for here. We just weren't quite ready for that. So the schedule going forward. That's all I had, Mayor.
All right, very good. Linda, here you go. It was sent out by Christian.
With regard to commissioner updates, I just would really like to highlight the upcoming Juneteenth events. And I know many of us are scheduled to be at some of them. And it's just a good, the community has put a lot of effort into it, and I appreciate the city's cooperation. I know one of the sessions is Arts in the Park, but they've helped bring in a special band or group, and so I think it's important that we be supportive and be there. So that's the gist of it.
John, you got anything?
Nope, pass. I got a couple. I got one email, you talk about CIP projects, saying that we should help fund a new community health building. And I don't even know if that's in our lane.
Community health building?
Yep, he says he's a dentist working at the community health at Kanza Community Health Center.
At the old post office?
Yep.
Okay.
And they want to do some renovations, and so I don't know. I didn't reply to him yet. I was thinking that may be something that community development block grant. Does that fit into that, or
probably would?
Low income.
Or he could come down here and make a presentation to put on CIP list, I guess. Does that
I
make
think
sense?
that deadline is passed for citizen review. Obviously, I mean the normal process. Obviously, they could make a pitch for you to potentially consider it, or maybe if at least for 24, they might want to get in line X. I think the public hearing for the CDBG plan is passed also. Okay. So, but for next year, I mean, that'd be something I would encourage them to get with our CDBG folks and maybe even the county CDBG. Have a process. The regional council and also has are working to help facilitate community development block grants, right, Linda?
Say it again.
The regional council
is
helping facilitate.
Has a grant writer, Holly Boyce, that is actually working with any of the communities in the 7 counties to help develop community development. And there is community development block grant money. The problem is that Manhattan is an entitlement city. So when it comes to Manhattan, somebody has to make the call about whether it can be done in Manhattan because we're entitlement, but certainly all the other communities in this area are.
But certainly, we've done CDBG for the senior center, and we've done it, and that would be eligible. They just need to get in our pipeline.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send him back some information on that. And then the other thing, I went to the ATA meeting, and it was scheduled at the same time as the CVB, so I couldn't go to both. Okay. So I missed the CVB one because ATA was talking about budget. And I voted against their budget because they want a 100% increase from the city. Okay, but it passed anyway. So we're going to get a request 100% increase from what they had last year. And part of that's driven by the fact that K-State, to my understanding, renewed the contract with Adabus, but only for the KSU loop on campus. And before it was system-wide. So now students can only ride the bus for free on campus. They can't do it on the regular routes. And so I think KSU did us a disservice on that. When you think about supporting the community, that just,
So what is their increase entitle us picking up the tab for free student rides? Or
didn't we cut it? Didn't we cut their allocation? Didn't we cut their
No, we gave them like a 10% increase.
But see, here's the problem. The federal government's got so many goofy rules that basically, for every dollar she gets in fares, that cuts the amount of money she can get from the federal government.
That is true.
So it really doesn't pay you. You're better off to let everybody ride the bus for free. Some cities have done that. Just because, but the problem is you also cannot get the federal money unless you've got local match of at least 23 cents on the dollar. So what she's been doing is taking, like when KSU has this contract, because that doesn't count as fares for some strange reason. So if you have a contract with ATA, she can use that as leverage to get federal money.
That's the match.
But you can't use the matching money for fares. So if you raise fares, you lose money. It's crazy.
Sounds like City University Fund need there.
except there's no money.
That's true.
Well, so I you know, I don't know, you know, what the answer is, and of course, we've been funding ATA out of economic development, but that's still a huge bite. I think they got 160,000 last year, and they're gonna want in the $300,000 range, so that's a big,
And that'll continue year after year, so it's not like a one-time.
yeah. And so, you know, I understand their budget dilemma, but, you know, and I know some of the routes are doing well. A lot of people, you know, get on the bus, Douglas Center, Dillon's West, but a lot of buses are still running around empty. And, you know, County Commissioner McKinney's on the board, and he mentioned that. He said, you know, a lot of empty buses here, so, you know, what's the deal? But so I'm not really sure what the answer is if we can actually sustain that big of an increase. But anyway, that's all I've got.
All right. I can't think of anything important, so we're going to call it a night here. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Mayor Hattasol.
Yes.